Hello friends, welcome to another live stream of Archaeologists in Quarantine. Happy New Year for those of you who weren't able to join us for our New Year's Eve party. Welcome back to another live streaming year of, I think it's going to be definitely an interesting year, hopefully. Archaeologists in Quarantine wise anyway, or archaeology lockdown wise. So without further ado, today I am joined with special guest Disha Ahluwalia, who is a PhD student and is actually the curator of Confessions of an Archaeologist, which is an Instagram sort of platform, just like Behind the Trowel. So it's great to have another fellow social media archaeologist who loves engaging with the public. So thank you, Disha, for joining us today. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy that we were able to do this. It's finally, I know it's taken some time to organize.
And I'm really happy that you're finally able to do this.
Yeah, so I remember we met on another live stream where you were interviewing me for Indian Archaeology Centre.
Exactly. Yes. That was interesting actually. And we had really, we had elaborate talk about commercial archaeology and whatnot. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, it was such a good one. And oh, apologies. Apologies for that. Yeah, and it was so great to actually speak with you about the difference between, Indian commercial archaeology and British commercial archaeology. And that live stream, I think we'll be able to get, and maybe I'll be able to post onto YouTube as a separate upload, maybe.
Yeah, because in India we have next to nothing in terms of commercial archaeology, and whereas in UK you have commercial archaeology, and there's an opportunity for archaeologists to be employed and do something besides academic. Whereas in India it's just either you do research or you do nothing. It's like that. So it's interesting.
It's very interesting to see the difference.
Yeah.
Actually, it's I think maybe European archaeologists take it a little bit for granted. I think we do have more opportunities. Pros and cons to everything. I mean, working commercial is pretty difficult physically and mentally, different kind of stress to research. But so today's live stream, we actually want to talk about kind of like an introduction into Indian archaeology, or the archaeology of India, which is a very large subject. There's no way we can cover all of that in one stream.
Yeah, so when we were discussing about the topic, and I remember I was just thinking, what I should include and what I should exclude. I was like, it's impossible to cover the whole subcontinent. Just forget the country. India, as we know today, is a political, democratic country. But it's just impossible because there's so much, and so yeah, I somehow try to include, few sites that were the game changer, or they are the game changers in terms of Indian history and, or I can say South Asian history and South Asian archaeology. So they're one of the important sites. So I just hope I'm making sense when I'm talking about it and I'm keeping things clear, because there is so much that we can discuss and talk about. It was very difficult to handpick few sites.
It's true, it's a very difficult one, but I think we'll all be just excited to get a little aspect of just the wealth of archaeology and history surrounding India. So without further ado, it'd be great, please, if you could share your screen and show us some of the game changers in Indian archaeology. So for our viewers at home, don't forget you can ask questions as we are going through the live stream. Just put that in the box. If you're on Instagram, head over to YouTube, and again, please ask questions within the chat box. It's better for me so I can actually find it, because Instagram, sometimes I lose your questions. So apologies if I don't get to ask them, because I probably haven't seen it. So head over to YouTube, link is in the bio.
As I mentioned earlier, when we were discussing about the topic, we thought we would give sort of an introduction and talk about introduction of archaeology in India. But one thing we all need to keep in mind is that India is a very new country. Its formation, it's just, 70 odd years. And prior to that, the entire subcontinent, collectively has given rise to many archaeological cultures. There have been many historical events which political boundaries cannot divide. They are, as I like to call it, shared history between our neighboring countries. And it's sort of very difficult to just isolate today, post 1947 era, sitting in 2021, and say, this is the archaeology of India. Whereas, the human existence have been in the subcontinent for millions of years. But it is also true that the political boundaries have now been set, and we have to keep these limitations in mind. So I have tried to exclude few sites which are, shared sites or sites which are in our neighboring countries, and I try to limit the sites which are the game changers for archaeology of Indian subcontinent, if I say so, and also of history of Indian subcontinent. These are the sites which gave rise to many questions, which solved many research questions, and are still intrigued. We are still intrigued by the material culture and the wealth that we get. So, as I was talking to you about earlier, that um, the Indian subcontinent's history and archaeology goes back to millions of years, and we cannot put a date or a time frame to it. Uh, when we talk about archaeology of India, we have to go back to prehistory. We have to go back to Paleolithic period and see when it all started. And this is a map where you can see all the Paleolithic sites being dotted around. You can see so many sites have been excavated, explored. There are a number of sites which give some amazing results. And among them is the site of Atirapakam. The site is important because the date that we get from the site is about 1.5 to 1.7 million years ago. And the hand axes and the culture material, they are all dated. Scientific dates from the site suggest that the antiquity of prehistoric man in the subcontinent is as old as 1.5 to 1.7 million years ago. The site is also important in other respects. That there was earlier a date set for out of Africa, that the early humans migrated out of Africa at certain period and reached subcontinent. But the site of Atirapakam has pushed the date back to around 398,000 years ago. So that is pushing back to about 200,000 years. So Atirapakam is important for many respects, and it's one of the amazing archaeological sites. Another prehistoric site that I should mention here is Sampur. This site is dated to 1.2 million years, and it's one of the best examples of a Schulen workshop. So we have found, the archaeologists have found debitage at the site, and the site was excavated back when there were no early dates. There were no dates like the Atrapakam was not dated. But today, if you look at the sample along with Atrapakam, we have this amazing, history of prehistoric man in the subcontinent. And another site to mention here is Pagoda, which is one of the dense Assyrian sites in the world. If anyone is ever planning to come to India and want to go on a prehistoric tour, do visit Pagoda. It's a huge site and densely. You will find artifacts everywhere. It's that dense. You will be walking on artifacts. It's that dense, and you will get that feel, of how Paleolithic society flourished in that region. Another side, and this we published this at Confessions. This site is a megalithic site, and megaliths is something we find across the globe. We find in many different contexts. The dates differ, the society and the cultural context differ. In Indian subcontinent too, megaliths have different attestation, affinities to different cultures. And this particular site is from southern India, and the site when it was first discovered in 1800s, the person who discovered it thought that these are not tombs but houses of dogs. That's they actually the person actually made such a notion, but of course it's not houses of dogs. These are megalithic tombs, and the excavation has shown that there have been many. They have found a lot of artifacts and human remains from the site. And the site's antiquity goes from one first millennium BCE to Iron Age. That is, around 800, 600 BCE. So the antiquity is about 3,000 years. Further, the background that I've given is just a quick background to prehistory of India. There are so many sites that I've missed, and I'm not doing any justice to prehistoric past of the Indian subcontinent. But I've handpicked few sites which have early dates or which are game changers. As I've mentioned, the first site of Pakkam is a game changer in many respects. And then uh, with prehistory in the subcontinent, and in fact, with archaeology of the subcontinent, it is never vertical. Many archaeologists, previously have tried to put archaeology of the subcontinent in a very vertical strata. They try to put cultures that precedes or succeed each other, but in context of Indian subcontinent, that is not the case. The history and the archaeology is linear. And similarly, one of the most important aspects of Indian archaeology or the archaeological subcontinent is the Bronze Age civilization, that is the Indus or Harappan civilization. And I think if I talk about the subcontinent of India, I cannot miss the Indus Valley civilization. And this particular, um, you know, chart is very interesting because it suggests that Neolithic starts in the subcontinent around 7000 BCE. And Neolithic does not even start with Mehergarh, which is in the northwestern frontier today in present-day Balochistan. But we have dates such as 6500 BCE at sites in Ganga Plain, also in the eastern half of the subcontinent. So the early food production era began about 7000 BCE, which continued till 5500 BCE, which is the early date or Ravi phase of early Harappan at the site of Harappa, which is the site of Harappan civilization. And that goes on up till 2600 BCE, where there is onset of mature phase of Harappan civilization, where the trade has took over, where craftsmanship and metallurgy has increased, the craft has improved. The Harappan phase of starts about 2600 BCE, and it goes on to around 1900 to 1700 BCE. Post that, we have late Harappan phase, which is the localization era. When I say localization era, it means that many local cultures have started to come up, and for a really long period of time, even after a few decades after independence, the period from 2000 BCE to 1500 or 1000 year BCE was considered as dark age. This was considered for a really long period of time. I think a lot of it has to be the archaeology started with British archaeologists, and Archaeological Survey of India was set up by in 1853 by Alexander Cunningham, and then you have John Marshall and many other British archaeologists who have excavated sites. And Harappa, in fact, is the credit of Harappa also goes to John Marshall and his team. But once the independence, India was an independent country. It has to find its own identity in other terms that now Harappa and Mohenjo-daro was part of newly formed Pakistan, and India now has to find its own ancestry again. In that respect, they started hunting for many Harappan sites in the eastern domain of Harappa, which is now in Indian context. That is the eastern zone, the western zone is Pakistan, Balochistan. That era. So they started to find Harappan sites, and in that regard, there were many gaps in the antiquity, the chronology. It was not adding up. So when the late Harappan sort of ends by 1500 BCE, 1500 to 1000, there was nothing. No sites were discovered back then. And archaeologists thought that that is when the famous Aryans have migrated. So the theory of Aryan migration, which was earlier invasion, which changed to migration, sort of fitted that bracket earlier. But today we have many sites, which date back to 1200, 1300 BCE. Other cultures which were thought to be, early historic cultures dating to 1000, now there are sites which have pushed back those dates to 1500, maybe 1400, 1300 BCE. So today we are in such a position that we cannot say that there was a dark age. Of course, the dark age, the whole concept has been removed, but also in terms of Aryan migration, there is a whole new debate now. And the new discoveries that I will mention further in my presentation are also giving rise to many, new controversies and giving rise to many confusions instead of clearing many doubts. So this is, you can see, but after 1000 BCE, you have the republics. 600 BCE is the time where Buddhism, the time of Buddha, and post that the Buddhism became one of the important religions in the subcontinent, and that is also the time where the republics, which we call Mahajanpadas, were dotted around in the northern half of the subcontinent, and then the city states, the concept of city states became very important. And then you have the Ashoka Maurya, and then they have many dynasties following, which are the Kushans, and then that the chronology goes on. But the tricky part is, of course, the proto and the prehistoric period where I work. My work also concentrates between the time frame of 2000 BCE to 1000 BCE. And yeah, so this is the chronology. One of the most important sites for me when I say, when I was handpicking, I had to mention Bozo Home. Bozo Home is located near Srinagar in Kashmir, and it's a Neolithic site. And um, it's a site where you have a continuous continuation from Neolithic habitation to megalithic, because you have megaliths as you can see in the screen, and then all the way to early historic. So at one side we have the linkage from Neolithic, that is the food production era, and then to megaliths, and then to early historic. And it's one of the most important sites. And without that, I think we cannot talk about the antiquity or archaeology of the subcontinent. And interestingly, and this is the red dot is where Bozo Home is located. This is a map of Kashmir. And you can see there are many Neolithic sites within the valley. These sites, there are almost 48 sites, and only few are excavated. And one of them is Bozo Home, which was first excavated in 1930, and then later on was excavated by Archaeological Survey of India from 1960 to 1970, a few years in between. And now we finally have the report. So if anybody wants to go through, the report is on the website of Archaeological Survey of India. And this these are the circular pit dwellings at Bozo Home. You can see on the section. And on the right, there is a small arched corridor plastered with mud. At Bozo Home, there is a continuation, there is a progression or development from pit dwelling to mud brick structures, and then to early historic structures. So the sites like these are very rare. And also, interestingly, they are contemporary to Harappan civilization. So as I said earlier, initially in my presentation, that usually what we do when we talk about prehistory is that we put Paleolithic, then Mesolithic, Neolithic, and then protohistoric or the Bronze Age, then Iron Age. But in the context of the subcontinent, nothing is vertical. There is linearity. You have Harappans, then you have the contemporary Chalcolithic sites, which are the rural sites, agro-pastoral sites dotted around the subcontinent. In east, you have Neolithic sites flourishing. along with Harappans. In north, that is Bozo Home, we have Neolithic, then megalithic sites existing in contemporary period as that of Harappans. In south, we have megalith. So you can very well understand that the archaeology and the history of the subcontinent pre-historic period in proto-historic period is not vertical; it's linear. And the site is also important because as I've mentioned, you have evolution of Neolithic tools at this particular site. And also the pottery that I've mentioned in the slide, uh, it shows a Harappan connection. So the painting and the figure that is on the pot is very Cote in nature, and Cote is an early Harappan site in the northwest of the subcontinent. So you can see and very well can understand that there has been some trade contact because you have production of tools here, craftsmanship, and also they were producing many agricultural produces such as lentils. Okay, so they were production and then they were distribution. So the trade was existing at that period of time. So the cross-cultural trade is very well depicted in the antiquities that are found at the site of Bozo Home. There is a very interesting slab with a hunting scene, and then that is a necklace, agate necklace. These are the only few things that I could handpick and put, but in all honesty, Bozo Home's antiquity is just mind blowing. There is so much at the site that has been found, and very interestingly, it is now Archaeological Survey of India is planning to restore the site. So I'm really happy and I'm really glad that Archaeological Survey of India, and it's a protected site, but they are now taking strict measures to protect the site, to conserve it, and I hope there will be further excavations because I would be really happy to be part of the team if I get the chance.
Well, fingers crossed to that. That sounds really exciting.
I can't wait. I just hope the site is excavated. So this is a very interesting map, and I picked this map from a very latest publication recently. And this map is interesting because it shows early farming cultures dotted in green triangles. And then you have sites of Indus Valley or Harappan civilizations, which are excavated or non-excavated sites. And then you have sites which are the square purple squares, which are the post-Harappan or the post-Indus phase, sites of the post-Indus phase. So in the north or the northwestern India, you can see right here, right from 7,000 BCE all the way to 1,000 or maybe perhaps later. You can see right here at the site. And uh, there are sites like Dholavira right here, which is a very important site. I'll be talking about it further. And then there are sites like Kalibangan. You can see Harappa. You can see so many important sites dotted here. The sites of Ahichatra, which is here. Hastinapur is a site of Kurus, which is mentioned in Mahabharata as the capital of Kurus. It was a capital of Aryavart. The site of Ahichatra was the capital of northern Panchala, another important republic mentioned in the epic of Mahabharata. Mathura is where Lord Krishna was born, and then the antiquity of Mathura is is also interesting because you have a long continuous history at Mathura all the way to Mughal, because Agra is very nearby. Then you have, closer to Delhi, you have Kalibanga, Tarkanwala Dera. This is the area where I work, and then you have Pakistan on the west, and you can just see what is happening, the culturally and the cross cultural and the cultural traits that are present in material remains. One can only imagine if you try to write, your mind baffles the kind of material culture we get at the site. Interestingly, the site of Alamgirpur here, very close to Hastinapur, is the easternmost outpost of Harappan civilization. That is the easternmost site. So beyond that, you don't find any remains of Harappans. and this is the easternmost site. So this map is really interesting. So on 5th January 1921, and it was very recent that we celebrated 100 years of Harappa, and the discovery of Harappa and the way it was excavated is very interesting, and I think that story goes down in history. It was Charles Mason who was standing on the mound and he just thought it's a Buddhist site. So did Alexander Cunningham. They didn't realize that such a huge mound could be of a very early antiquity. And it was only when Sir John Marshall decided to put up a trench at Harappa with his colleagues, Indian archaeologists, there who were part of his team. So on 5th January 1921 is when the first trench was laid down and the excavation of Harappa began. And little did we know that within 4 years' time, Sir John Marshall will publish something in the Illustrated London News, and then later on we'll get to know that the connections are far and wide. He'll get to know that the culture that he's talking about is connected to Mesopotamia, Sumer, and there you go. It's one of the oldest civilizations of the world. This is one of the sites of Dholavira, and I'll go back to the map again. The reason why I didn't pick up, I didn't mention any sites which are in Pakistan today because, I thought let us just talk about the political boundaries of India and the sites that are mentioned, the political boundaries of India. But Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Rakhi, Dholavira, these are one of the biggest, and also Ganeriwala, these are one of the five biggest Harappan sites that are present in the Harappan civilization or present within the realms of Harappan civilization. And Dholavira is I think the fifth largest site, if I'm not mistaken, and it's present here in Gujarat, in Kutch, right here, very close to Karachi, and it's one of the most important sites and one of the well excavated sites. And if anybody asks me to pick one site, I will pick Dholavira, hands down. It's my favorite site, and I think I can go on and on about it. And the reason why Dholavira is one of my favorite sites is not only because of its archaeology, but because of the story of its discovery. When Dholavira was first reported, and archaeologist called J.P. Joshi first visited the site, he saw this huge mound, and he saw dressed stones. And technically, back then, they understood Harappa with the help of their mud bricks or their brick structures. So now you had these dressed stones, and ultimately he thought that it is an early historic site or a fort. He had no realization that the site that he's walking on or he's exploring is the site of Dholavira, which is in Harappan, very important Harappan site. So it was many years later, Dr. R.S. Bich, who excavated the site, he explored, he mapped out the site before he could even excavate the site. He mapped it out in such a way that he realized with the help of contouring and survey that what he would get at the site. So the story of its discovery and the story of its excavation is very important, very close to my heart. So this is where Dholavira is, and this is the layout of Dholavira. Now Dholavira is a three-tier Harappan city, and the concept of citadel, lower town, middle town has come to India with the help of Sir Mortimer Wheeler. So he was excavating, I think, in some Roman site, and he there conceptualized this concept of middle town, lower town, and citadel. So when he was excavating Harappan sites, we too put the same concept here in Harappan archaeology. So Dholavira is a three-tier site, and there is this citadel, there is a middle town and the lower town. So the division of this site, division of this settlement, the township is very interesting at Dholavira, which makes it one of the most important sites. As I mentioned, it's one of the largest mature Harappan sites in the subcontinent. It's a three-tier township. So, when initially when Harappan civilization was uh, excavated and people got to know about Harappan civilization, people didn't realize that there would be so much of regional variation. There would be so much of distinction and diversity within Harappan culture. People thought that it is there will be only uniformity and standardization. But when you look at even the building material of Harappan sites across the realm, you see that it's not standardized. So they would use whatever is locally uh, available. So in case of Dholavira, they have used dress stones, and it's one of the few examples at this, in the Harappan realm. It's also important because it's known for its rainwater harvesting. So it's the only site in the Harappan realm which has rainwater harvesting dated back to around 5,000 years old ago, and it has efficient drainage system. So the drains at Dholavira is get quite huge. If you're around 5 feet tall, you can easily stand in the drains. You can just stand there. So they are quite big, huge uh, sites, and there are reservoirs spread across this township so that the rainwater can be preserved in all the reservoirs, because if anyone know about Kutch, it is a very it's salt desert. So in during winter season, there is no water; it's mostly dry. So there was a need by the occupants of Dholavira to preserve water. So there are wells, there are tanks, there are reservoirs, and then there are huge drainage system, and of course the rainwater harvesting system at the site. Another important feature of Dholavira excavation is the 3 meter long inscription with Harappan symbols. We have not found similar, signboard or a 3 meter long Harappan inscription with Harappan letters anywhere else. And of course, then we have trade, craftsmanship, and the local communities. We have a bead manufacturing workshop. So in the lower towns and the middle town, the craftsmanship and the craftsmen were living and they were working. And there are quarry sites where the elements, architectural members were being transported all the way to Mohenjo-daro. So we have Harappan manufactured pillar stones all the way in Mohenjo-daro. And of course, you have beads and whatnot from this particular area of Gujarat being transported all across Harappan realm, and of course, uh, outside as well. So this is one of the rock cut reservoirs, and the drains, you can see they are quite huge. And this is the replica, or you can see, because the signboard has been buried again. So this is all we can find in the spot where the signboard was. It's one of a kind discovery at Dholavira. Another important site that is one of my favorite is Kalibangan. Kalibangan is in Ghaggar Basin in Hanumangarh district in Rajasthan, and it's a very important site because as I was talking about diversity in building materials, Kalibanga, the building material used at Kalibanga are mud bricks. The sun-baked bricks have been used. So in only in the drainage that they have used baked bricks. So the architecturally also the site is very unique. The way the town planning, the layout of the site is, and within the in a complex there are also burials that have been found. This is the map of Kalibanga, which was excavated by ASI, and the report is now finally published. And so you can see the site was excavated and now reburied. The reason why they have to rebury the site is because the building material is so fragile. if you expose mud bricks to rain and other, if you expose them to sun, they are prone to more deterioration. So in the absence of any proper conservation measures, the site has been reburied. But I'm glad that they are planning to expose the structures again and to conserve them for for future generation or for people to go and see. You can see the structures exposed in the section also. You can see the brick structures and all being exposed. It's one of beautiful sites. Rakhi, I think everybody who know Indian archaeology, who is aware of Indian archaeology, would know about Rakhi. Now, Rakhi is one of the biggest Harappan sites in the eastern domain in Indian context. Many the excavators actually they are now propounding that Rakhi is bigger than Mohenjo-daro or is one of the biggest sites, but we don't have conclusive proof. So let's just say it's the third or the fourth largest site, Harappan site next to Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Ganeriwala. And the site is important in today's context in India is because this is the site where the ancient DNA has been secured, the genome sequencing has been done, and interestingly, the results from the DNA suggest that the Harappans who were living in that region, in the region of Rakhi, were indigenous. They had no connection with Central Asia. So this is another, it's another evidence which negates the Aryan connect with Central Asia. But we cannot say much today. We can only feel proud that the DNA sequencing could be done after rigorous hard work because it's very difficult to get a sample or secure a DNA sample in Indian conditions because the preservative conditions in India are not conducive. It's very difficult to get a non-contaminated sample. So I'm personally, thrilled by the discovery that they could get genome sequencing and they do suggest and the sequencing and the results do suggest that the Harappan population was indigenous. But we should not use this particular data, for the whole entire realm as of now, because as I mentioned, if there is diversity in the culture, there is of course diversity in the population as well. And Harappans were traders, Harappans were adventurers. They had connections with civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, and we cannot just limit our understanding. But of course, Rakhi is one of the sites which is changing the perspectives of Indian archaeology today, as the Dholavira and the other sites. Now, Binjor is a site where I had worked for 3 seasons, and it's a site which is very close to my heart, and it's a site which is again changing narratives. The site is located in the Ghaggar Basin, Rajasthan, and if I go back to the map, once I can show you where Ghaggar Basin is. I'm so sorry. So Ghaggar Basin is right here. Ghaggar is a river which, when crosses the border, becomes Hakra. Okay, so this is Ghaggar Hakra River, which is very interesting. So the river also changes name when it crosses border. So this is my study area as well, and it is where the site of Kalibanga is situated. And Binjor is one of a kind site because it's the industrial production center. And I remember when in our first season when we excavated the site, we had no knowledge that Binjor is going to become such an important site in understanding Harappan metallurgy, Harappan craftsmanship, and the industrial aspect of Harappan civilization. We had no understanding because here we have found intact evidences of production, copper object production. We have seen the changes in cultural material. We have seen connection with other Harappan sites which are in the western domain of Harappan civilization. So it's one of the sites which is one of a kind. It's dated to the 4500 BCE and it goes on to 2100 BCE. So these are few of, we can see there is furnace, and there are multiple hearths. About over 250 hearths have been found at the site in one single context. So without changing any cultural strata, or without changes of any phase, in one cultural phase, about 250 hearths have been found, two kilns have been found, and I can just go on and on about the antiquities. Um, in true sense, it's a craftsman village. It's an industrial village. It's, of course, it's a rural site. It's not an urban center. It's a semi-urban or a rural center. We can understand that by the kind of architectural features that we have noted at the site. But it's an important site because they are the ones who were supporting the big cities of Harappa and Harappan civilization. So you can see the huts. These are the few photographs. This particular hut on the right is the interconnecting hut. And to manufacturing copper, you do need such varying type, varieties of fire hearth, and you. So there is a map again. This is Kalibanga, and this is Binjor, which is very close to the border of India and Pakistan, about 3 kilometers away from the border. And we can see the amount of pottery and the hearth that we have got at the side, and then the mud brick structure. So the building material was as similar to Kalibanga, was mud bricks. They have used burnt bricks only where for drainage, or where they're using water. So generally they have gone for mud bricks because the mud is easily available. So there was no need to create or manufacture bricks. These are few of the antiquities, the seals. Another important aspect of Binjor is that at one slide we see an evolution of Harappan seals. I have not put the slide here. I'm sorry for not putting it, but I'm just saying it here that it's one of the sites where you see the evolution of pictographically of seal, from geometric patterns to amalgamation of Harappan script and animals, and then in the late Harappan just script, no animal figurines. So it's very interesting when we have seen the such evidences coming up from one single site, and that to a rural site. Here is this particular hut uh, on the left is, it's not for any industrial purpose or domestic use. We think it was for some sort of ritual or some sort of religious activity, because Ghaggar, as we know, is the ancient river goddess Saraswati. Okay, so perhaps, and this particular activity we have found on the enclosure wall, the southern enclosure wall. And so perhaps they were doing some sort of ritualistic, some performing some rituals or something, because we didn't find any evidences of any industrial activity happening, any craft activity happening, no domestication activity in this particular context. So we think it was more or less for ritual. And this particular spots that you see on the right is also very interesting, because if I turn it over, there is only one particular, under the knob, there is a one, to put, like you see here in the seal, this particular thing, it's somewhat similar to that. So if I have a stand made, I can put the pot, because the pot is not hollow, it's flat from the base, and then there's just one hole which goes up to the knob, just to, so that the would suggest that this particular pot was fixed on something vertically, or some sort of a stand. So it's very interesting because it resembles this altar in many Harappan seals. Just below the unicorn, you can see this particular thing. So if I put this on a stand, it will resemble. These are few of the antiquities and the designs. You can see the pottery designs are so elaborate. Uh, we, can you recognize this particular animal on the right, far right?
It looks like an ostrich or something.
Yes, it's ostrich.
Is it?
Yes, it is. You can see. It's very interesting, right? So we have found so many interesting pictographical representation of animals which are not part of that ecology at all. And having ostrich in one of the pottery is just amazing. And you can see the floral design in the pottery. And I remember one of my colleagues, he would just stand and would had to trace the pottery, and then he had to go back and trace it in AutoCAD. It was just such a tedious task for him, but kudos, he did an amazing job in replicating the pottery digitally. And we have copper objects and many animal figurines, gold, fragments and beads, of course. So now coming to the side, I think everyone must be waiting for Sanauli. Sanauli is the new discovery, and of course, it has changed the perspective. It has given us so many questions, confusion in academia. Indian archaeologists are not able to understand where to put Sanauli today, and it is because of the discovery that is very accidental in nature. And to tell you the story, we were actually excavating another site called Barnawa within 20 kilometers radius of Sanauli, and it's an early historic site, and the site finds mention in the epic of Mahabharata, but we had no idea that Sonali will be more glamorous and more important than Barnawa. And I was excavating Barnawa at that point of time when this is the director, Dr. S.K. Manju, when he decided to put up one trench at Sonali because he had the license and the workforce to do so. And he decided, just let's take one trench, let's take some samples from Sonali and see if we can get a skeleton for DNA perhaps. Let's just take we just had to take samples. And little did we know that at the side of Sonali we'll make such amazing striking discovery. So Sonali is very close to New Delhi, the capital. And earlier it was excavated in 2005, and it was excavated for 13 long months. And in 2005, when it was discovered for the first time, it's very interesting because villagers, they were so used to finding bones and copper objects because it's a sugarcane field, so it's flat. So when they're plowing the field, they would find some antiquities or something or the other. Potsherds were, regular occurrence at the site. So they would constantly find some antiquity or the other. But in one instance, they had found very interesting antiquities, copper objects, which were important. And one of the villagers who understood its importance because I think he says he has once visited National Museum and has seen a Harappan antiquity there. So he sort of understood its importance. So he and other villagers, they contacted the authorities, and therefore Archaeological Survey of India then excavated the site back in 2005 and 6 for 13 long months. So it was a continuous excavation for 13 months. And in the excavation, they exposed 116 burrows. So 13 months, 116 burrows. So Sonali, this discovery, of course, has changed, the perspective and it's changed Indian archaeology altogether. But Sonali has a habit of doing that. So in 2005 also, it did the same thing. It just caught people by surprise. Earlier, it was thought that Sonali is an early Harappan site, but today, of course, the contention and its cultural affiliation has changed radically. Sonali is located very close to Alamgir Fort. This is where Sonali is. So this is where very close, somewhere here is Sonali. This is Harappan. This shaded area is the boundaries of Harappan civilization, and within the particular realm of Harappan civilization is Sanauli. So I don't that was one of the reasons why archaeologists back in 2006 thought that Sanauli is a late Harappan site, and they gave Harappan affinity to the remains, the burial remains of Sanauli. These are the pictures from the excavation done in 2005 and 6. So you can see even back in 2005, it was equally rich. And in March, we decided to take up a small trench at the site. And this is the picture of what happened when we decided to take a small trench. So what started with this one small trench became so phenomenal and became so important. 8 burials in totality. In 2018, 8 burials were excavated at the site. And then the following season, we exposed the area, towards south here. And we got a very amazing discovery then as well. So this is the picture of where the chariots were exposed in 2018.
I just love how, I was just going to say, like, it just, every single aerial photo that you've shown us of the excavations, it just looks amazing. Again, it just looks so beautifully done. So for anyone at home, when we're excavating, we're on the ground, and only afterwards sometimes we get to see the aerial shots, and then you can see if like how bad your angles were. But it's like every single one is just like straight, like it's beautiful, really beautiful to look and admire the work. That's hard work, very hard work.
So you can see the orientation of all the burials is similar. See, they are oriented. This is north here. So this is south. So the head of the skeleton, this is one of the skeleton, is towards north. Okay. So the orientation is similar. So there were many kinds of burials that were found at Sanauli. So one is your extended burial where the skeleton remains can be seen. The other was secondary burial where a person had died somewhere else, but his remains have been reburied at Sanauli. There are secondary burials here as well, and then there are symbolic burials here, where just the objects that the person, the deceased, used to use, and these remains have been put in the burial pit as memorial, as a tomb, or and they are buried. So we have 8 types of burial practices at one site alone. So there are different types of burials, which is very interesting. And you see the pots here. So one of the pots had here in a row. One of the pots had we found botanical grains, which one of the grains was dated. One of the samples was dated. Then another one was for water, because we found a small miniature pot, maybe to take out liquid and pour. And the other one, I don't know, we still haven't got the results back from the sample. And they are all sealed. There are lids which seal the pots. So in even today, when we cremate, in Hindu ritual, Hindu culture, when we cremate, we give some offerings. We offer ghee, we offer water, we offer food grains. So there are these offerings that even today it's part of our ritual, part of our practice. And in Sanauli also we do find similar practices resonating back then. And these two are the important pits where the chariots have been discovered. These two pits. This particular skeleton is of a female, and a miniature dagger has been found. And when we excavated this area, we exposed this area in 2019. We have found another female burial in the same orientation, somewhat like this, a female burial with a miniature dagger. So it sort of makes me wonder that were women part of this, warrior class? Were they part of this, activity or not? And over here, we've got baked brick structure. a structure which perhaps were used for some ritual or some activity or something like that. So my boss, Dr. Manjun, the director, his wife, she's also was a co-director. They are showing the man who excavated Dholavira, the site that I mentioned. So they're showing him the antenna sword, and this is the sword, the antenna sword. It's a big sword. You can see the scale and you can understand its size. And it's a sword with hilt and the mid-ridge. So the metallurgy and craftsmanship is not a primitive stage. It's pretty advanced. Okay. The weapon, the way the weapon, we there are some people, some scholars who study the way the weapons develop. They change. So if anyone is interested to look at the Sonali's weaponry and try to understand that, they're welcome to do so. So far, it's one of the important evidences because these such swords we do find in early historic or medieval period. We do not find in 2000 BCE or contemporary to Bronze Age Harappan era. This is another very interesting bit. Here is a dagger. Here is a shield. This particular H-shaped object is a shield. We didn't believe it's a shield. What we did was, underneath this particular shield is a yoke of the chariot, which I show in following pictures. There's a yoke of the chariot. This shield is placed on the yoke of the chariot. Okay. So we removed the shield because we had to excavate further and we had to expose what was below. And we did the scanning of this shield. And when we did the normal, just scan, get in clinics and hospitals, when we did the scan, we found that there is a copper handle at the back. That's how we understood that's a shield. And in many contemporary societies, you do have 8-figure shield. Even in Roman Empire, you had this 8-figure shield. And this particular pit, it had daggers, it had copper helmets, it has sword. There's another Indian sword right here, and a chariot here, which was exposed later after the picture was taken. So this you can see the coffin. The coffins are lead, and thank God for the copper, covering, and they are decorated with copper. If there was no copper, I don't think we would have recognized that there were legs, and you can see the legs of the coffin, and because it was too close to the surface, the top part of the coffin is destroyed because it was too close to the surface where it was prone to plowing and other human intervention. But we understand that there must have been a copper covering around the coffin also, and there must be some sort of a cover because there were few fragmentary bones here, just fragmentary. We couldn't get full skeleton. We couldn't get the remains, and I think that there must have been more remains, more human remains. And these lead coffins, these are one of the first instance in the Indian subcontinent where you have this practice of lead coffins. We never suspected that such practices are also undertaken by society in ancient India. We thought that we would just dig a pit, bury it, that's all. But doing such an elaborated process suggests something about the society that who were indulging in such elaborated rituals just to bury the dead. So I could only suspect that if the coffins are so ornate, if the coffins and the weaponry and the chariots are so ornate, I can only suspect and I can only hypothesize about the craftsmanship and the kind of society that existed during this period of time. So here is the chariot. This is the wheel of the chariot. You can see the copper triangles. You can see the copper triangles, and there are two chariots, one after the other. You can see the remains, the frame of the chariot, You can easily see. And we could only understand this because they were made of copper. If it was wood, the sediment of Sanauli is so difficult to work with because it'll get hard. You can see cracks in many of the pictures, even in the section. It's all cracked up because the more it's exposed to sun and to temperature, it becomes more dry and it starts crumbling. So I don't think if there was no copper, we wouldn't have understood that there was a chariot because it was so difficult to uncover the physical features in wood. It's very difficult. So thank God for the copper that we were able to understand that there are chariots and there are two chariots in this particular pit. So this pit is according to Dr. Manjul is a royal burial, he says. And the reason why he says royal burial is because there are uh, two chariots, full chariots. The coffin is decorated. The lid of the coffin has 8 anthropomorphic figures on top, and it's a bigger coffin. So the length of the coffin is about 8 feet, but the skeleton is not 8 feet. We have exposed the skull of the skeleton, and if we suspect, the height of the person who is buried must be around 6 feet, not more than that. That's what we suspect because we were not able to get any X-ray or any scan to penetrate. It's so thick, it's so huge. It is very difficult for us to excavate because we don't want to get rid of the cover on top. So it's still unburied. And we think that there are some burial objects or burial goods in the coffin. So when they buried the dead, they must have put some pots or something like that also. You know, Interestingly, it was these 4 pipes that were first exposed, and Dr. Manjul then had an idea as to what these 4 pipes would represent. He thought that it must be, an stand for the umbrella, for the throne, or some other thing. But as they were exposing, they actually destroyed some part of the chariot wheel here. They because they were using pickaxe and they were excavating, and they had no idea that they had to excavate vertically instead of going horizontally. And then they destroyed some copper, the edges, and then they realized that there is something here. So they were very careful. The whole team was very careful in getting these wheels exposed and then get consolidated because copper was deteriorating and preserve it. And yes, we have lifted these chariots. So this is the reconstruction of the chariot. So as I mentioned, there were 3 chariots, but the yoke of the chariot was below the shield in another pit. So in the pit where there was this hole, the full chariot, we couldn't recover the yoke. We think that is because it must be made up of wood with no copper engraving in it. So we missed that in the first season. But thankfully, this yoke has a similar copper triangles as the chariot. And this is done by Dr. Manjul. He's a great artist, and he has reconstructed a figure and how chariot must have been. Not more than 2 people can fit in the chariot, the space that it has. Um, so these are elements that we have found. We've got the sideboard, we have got the D frame, the pole, the yoke, the copper pipe which would attach the pole, and then there were copper, pipes, canopies, and other things. There are also copper hooks, huge hooks inside the frame as well. There were nails also, wheel in the hub here, because when near the hub also they do need a nail clipping. So this is the royal burial, the big coffin that I was mentioning about with 8 anthropomorphic figures. You can see because it was very close to the ground, to the surface, some of the copper objects here have been destroyed. But in last 3 years, we were able to recover some, part of it. And here is the chalice that I've shown in the first picture. Dr. Manjul was excavating the chalice. The chalice has a tortoise base, So it's a chalice with a thin stem and a tortoise base. So you cannot, it's very difficult to put it straight because of the weight. It'll just debalance. So you have to hold the chalice. So that's the reason why we call it chalice. And it was kept, uh, upwards down. It was kept like that because that's the only way they could place it. And the burial goods are placed under the coffin in all the burials that we have found. The burial goods such as uh, um, this chalice, helmet, many of the antiquities are placed below the coffins. So this is also a legged coffin. You can see the copper wrapped around the, the.
Yeah. It's interesting that, yeah, I can see what you mean now. If there's no copper, it's so difficult to see the different
Yeah, because you can see roots coming out from your leg.
context.
These are the roots of the tree. So, and this is a pot, of course, but you can see the roots and everything. So it's very difficult. See the sediment; it's cracking up. And it was so difficult to excavate. We could not use pickaxe. We had to use sculptors' tools, those miniature tools, or dental tools. Like we literally had to get the dental kit to help us expose these small things because and we would find nails which are really small rivets and nails made up of copper. So the wood craftsmanship and the carvings and the woodwork is amazing along with the copper metallurgy at the site. So this is what we have found so far. Of course, in the following season, we have made more discoveries. Unfortunately, I didn't have the pictures, so I could not put that. But today we place Sanauli as not a later upland site, but an OCP site, and you can understand what I'm talking about with the help of this particular chart. And the issue with India, or I can say a characteristics of Indian archaeology is that many of the culture in post-Harappan period are named after pottery. So as my study area is painted grey ware, OCP is also one type of pottery that is contemporary to Harappans. So Sanauli is a site which is contemporary to Harappans. And the date that we got EMS dates from site which is around 2000 BCE. So it's right before the onset of late Harappan phase. And let's see. I just hope we get to excavate the site again because the kind of discovery we have made, and we have also done GPR surveys, so very close to the chariots. We have also for evidences of more remains. So we just hope. So this is the happy moment when everybody was so happy at the site. So this is Dr. R.S. Bish, as I mentioned, we excavated Dholavira. And we are also happy that we are making such amazing progress at the site. So thank you so much.
It's so fascinating. It really was. Thank you for let me just end the screen for you. 1 second. There we go. Perfect. So yeah, for our viewers at home, everyone's saying, wow, that was fascinating. Like, it's unbelievable. Of course, like, I knew a little bit about Sanauli. How do you pronounce it?
Sanauli. Yeah, you pronounced
it. Sanauli. Phew, pronounced it correct. Yeah, Sanauli, like, amazing site that did come up. I think, was it maybe a few years ago now? They did quite a lot of publicity on it, and it being one of the largest, the largest burial site.
Yeah, in the subcontinent, yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. We did have a few questions regarding it. So we know that we found royal burials there, or we interpret it as royal burials, or someone who has a lot of prestige and a lot of money. A question from Simple Archaeology: was there evidence of different social status within the burials other than the royal burial?
Yes, we do. Like we have excavated the following season as well, and we did not find similar, the richness in the burial, the way we found the royal burial. But also, if we look at the 116 boroughs which were excavated in 2005 and 6, we do see a difference. We do see the changes. We see some boroughs which are not as rich, some boroughs which are very rich, or some antiquities which just stand out. So I do think there is distinction. We can understand, but to say it conclusively, we need to excavate more. We need to find the habitation site, and we have mapped out the site in the last season. So we have everything ready. We just need permission, and we will be ready to go. But yeah, I can see that just by looking at the antiquities, there is some sort of division.
And with the question from Barbara, yeah, regarding, so how do you get the research funded? So for example, for this excavation, how does it work funding wise?
Okay, so most of the excavations that I have shown you were excavated by central government, and there's a department called Archaeological Survey of India, which was started by Sir Alexander Cunningham in 1853 and was later on revived post-independence. The same organization still stands today, and they are the authority in issuing licenses to all the excavation, even if a university is excavating or any other private organization is excavating. So, they are the authority in issuing license, and all the excavations that I've shown you are excavations of ASI, Archaeological Survey of India. So, they are directly funded by the government. That's why they are large scale excavations, because they are funded by the government.
And we did have a question from David Ian Howe earlier, which is from Ethnocynology. And it's something that we mentioned earlier, but again, maybe just it might be good to address. Does India have like a cultural heritage management program? So in the sense of how we have commercial archaeology in the UK, how is it in India?
We don't have commercial archaeology. All the cultural properties, the responsibility is divided between states and the central government. So we have, states, and then the central government, which is, of course, Archaeological Survey of India and other organizations like National Monument Authority. They monitor all the World Heritage and approximately 3,000 nationally protected monuments, and then the state government handles the rest. And then we have other organizations now, such as Intact. They are not the government funded, but they are NGOs who work in protecting the monuments, training students, conserving monuments. Then we have Aga Khan Trust, which also work in India in collaboration with Archaeological Survey of India. So we don't have a private organization or a commercial archaeology wing. Most of it is still within the corridors of government and state government and central government. So nothing is so far in the public domain as such.
Brilliant. Let's see, next question. Okay, question from Jeffrey. Thank you for your question. More general question. What could be done to promote such finds in India, being a person interested in Wayanad and what it has to offer? What can private players do? So I think, in other words, how can we promote finds in India?
See, I think today, if since I have worked, with Archaeological Survey of India, and now I'm a freelancer, I do my own research. If you ask me personally, I think it's now in the hands of young researchers now that we need to come up with solutions to promote Indian heritage on a global level. Like, for instance, Sanauli is such a discovery, which is, of course, grabs attention, but we are not able to promote it the way we would, or we would love to promote, right? The reason is because it falls under government guidelines, and it's so much of work that you need to do, paperwork, and etc., that it sort of limits your the resources. It gives you resources in excavation, but many ways it limits it. What we can do is we need to promote it via social media, perhaps, or have some or government agencies will have to buckle up and revolutionize their PR and their handling in social media. They need to do it also along with people like us who do it. So it's I think we are in transition phase. I hope sooner or later we will be able to be in a better place. But yes, I
Mm.
see in the there are so many sites, so many amazing sites, and I could only mention few. If we could have a platform where anyone can, come in and see it virtually, perhaps, and enjoy it, would be really great.
It's true. I think it's one of those things. It's like having these sort of conversations, more public engagement. It's one way of showing the finds and being able to show it in but it's easier, as you said. It's quite difficult to do it in a government sort of
Yes,
way, but of course that will be for the site itself, with putting signs up and all this sort of information, maybe getting more heritage protections on it. There's so much more that we could do. I'm curious, you said about how the Archaeological Survey Institute was created by what was his name, Sir?
and women in 1853, he was the one who started.
Yes. So before that, was there excavations going on in India that we
No,
know, were they documented?
before that, it was an antiquarian phase where only antiquities would be picked up, and then people would officers, British officers, they would just make them
Looting,
private
basically.
collection. But it was Sir
Mm.
Cunningham who first initiated and India was still under British Crown back then in 1853, and he was the one who started Archaeological Survey of India, and he was also the one who started surveying sites. He started surveying, mapping sites, describing sites, creating a record, a gazetteer of all the archaeological sites. And he was very much interested in Buddhist archaeology. So that's the reason why when he reached Harappa, he thought it's a Buddhist site. He couldn't
Mm.
understand that beyond or before 6th century BCE, the antiquity of the subcontinent could be pushed back to 3rd millennium BCE. And then, of course, it was Sir John Marshall who then excavated Harappa. And it was back in 1921, and just 2 decades before independence of the country.
That's really interesting, actually. So, do we know roughly what's happened to the artifacts that they were excavating? Have they been kept on site, or were they moved, I'm assuming, to the British Museum? Or do you have some on location still?
I'm sure there many artifacts are part of the private collection still. They've been passed on
Mm.
to generation after generation, because we have so many paintings, architectural members, so many things which now they are coming up as part of private collections. So I'm sure they are part of private collections. Some are in British Museum and other museums around the world. But yeah, so I think pre-independence we can't say much, especially pre-creation of Archaeological Survey of India. I don't think anyone has the record of what antiquity went where. The only record we have are the written records by British explorers or French explorers, Italian explorers, anyone, their written records. And interestingly, it was before the excavation of Harappa, it was a site of Kalibanga, which I've presented, was excavated way back in 1800s. It was excavated by an
Mm.
Italian explorer, Pescatori. He excavated the site, and he went back and he took the antiquities with him to Italy. And it was when he was studying those artifacts in Italy that he realized that these antiquities are earlier than he expected. So what he was doing, he was trying to come back and show them to Alexander Cunningham, but he died on the way, and we could not. But we do have the record. We have his written record, and he's somebody who has explored, and his explored material is with ASI, is with Archaeological Survey of India. So if just imagine if we had come back and we had actually shown those seals, Harappan seals to Cunningham, then we wouldn't have been calling it Harappan civilization. We would be calling it Kalibangan civilization. So, but it's when something had to come up and the discoveries happen like that. So it's very interesting.
It is interesting, and I like the way that, you know, it's so true. If we had shown that, we would
Yeah.
be calling it something else. And it's very interesting how we always use a name to associate with a time period. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. What a shame.
But
But
have the record, the written record. But, yeah.
so that's interesting. So we have to look at the written records to understand what was going on in regards to the artifacts itself. So with repatriation and things like that. That's interesting. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, we're running out of time because I know time-wise it's quite late for you. So let's just quickly see. I'll quickly try to get one more question in. I'm not sure about this. Maybe you do. Is there any truth behind Philip Sculptor notion of a lost part of India beneath the Indian Ocean?
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't understand the question. Is the person asking about underwater archaeology or?
Yeah, I think more so to do with underwater archaeology. Is there maybe a part of India that's still submerged under the Indian Ocean?
We have excavated a site called Dwarka, which is very close to Dholavira. It's in Gulf of Kutch in Gujarat. The site is known for its mention in the Indian epic of Mahabharata. It was, as per legend, it was the capital of Lord Krishna's kingdom. And excavations have been undertaken at the site, and we have laid Harappan deposits. So we don't know about the epic, but of course the antiquity of the site goes back to Indus Valley civilization, and some remains have been exposed. Similarly, in another area of Gujarat, that is Gulf of Cambay, the excavations have been undertaken, and they have also exposed some remains, archaeological remains, and they have dated the samples, which goes around 4,000 BCE, quite early. So we are not that advanced in underwater archaeology, but there is huge, huge potential because we have a very long coastline on both sides. So it's not only the western but also the eastern coast. There is huge potential.
And maybe would you try some underwater archaeology yourself?
Maybe. It has so many sites. Like, I have a list of sites that maybe one day I'll explore.
Well, I think it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. We've gone through so much. I'm sure we'll have more questions as soon as the live stream ends, but I do know that it is quite late for you, so we should probably call it. So for our viewers thank you again, Disha. It's been honestly an absolute pleasure. For our viewers at home, if you do have any questions for Disha, please put them in the comments section, and don't forget to hit that like button and that subscribe button on the YouTube video. And Disha's Instagram account, Confessions of an Archaeologist, is also in the description below. So check her account out. Do you go on any other social media platforms?
I think I'm on Facebook. We are on Facebook as well.
Okay, so I will link that then. I'll put that in the description as well, because it's quite important, public engagement, and it's just what we do. I think it's one of those things that the more we do it, the more we can find people who are also interested in the subject and change the narrative ourselves. I think that's the most important thing. We gotta change it. Yeah. So again, thank you, Disha. Anything else you'd like to say before we go?
I just want to thank you for having me, and it's been a great experience. And talking about a few of my favorite sites has been such a delight. And once again, thank you, and thank you so much for everyone who were patient enough to listen, and were kind enough to comment and ask questions. Just thank you again, and yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Again, thank you to our viewers. Again, we don't have time to answer the rest of your questions, so please put them in the comments below and we'll try to address them later on. That's all for now. Also, I forgot to say, tomorrow we have another live stream which will be looking at archaeology and gender, the stereotypes that is around archaeology as a discipline, as well as the archaeological record itself, how we interpret the deposits that we find. So that will be a very interesting stream. Please head over to that tomorrow and hopefully see you then. If not, have a lovely evening, have a lovely day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.